It's interesting, because like when you're looking down at the cell, I was just wondering, people could look down into the cell. How good is that? Suddenly they're going to see Mexico City down there. Yeah, all these organelle, Lifecolloid, and they have their own DNA and everything made. And they all excrete little spore, which has RNA and things. When you're listening, of course, you can hear, no question about it. You can hear how the ethmoid organ, which is behind the back of the nose, and how resonant our voice is. And you can hear sort of where the voice is resonant in a body. So, like where bagels, lox, and cream cheese was eaten, and before that even was eaten, the body is started to anticipate, those things. But of course, a lemon is going to cause, saliva to be starting to flow, and the ethmoid organ is amazing because it goes beyond smell and pheromone to be quite sensitive to the magnetic sensation of everything. Interesting because it's inner material which is very semiconductive. Like those who'd love to look into this a little bit more about the crystal gali, that very fine plate of bone that dampens internal noise and protects the consciousness, sort of really wedge-shaped projection, and a ridge landmark, of course, anterior of the skull base. And you and I, we have an aesthetic sense, and sound is made in the upper chamber and in the dental area and in the epiglottis. And you've got these three sound chambers. And so, for our listeners, somebody who hasn't too much resonance where the nose is going to be more, how are you doing? And so it's going to be a voice more, voice more like that. And so, you can hear sort of resonance isn't present where that is. And so, our voice is causing you or I to have a participation of hemisphere synchronization and voice resonance and things. And so, coming to the cytoplasm down in the cell, it could not have proper microvoltage, okay? And down there, the organelle can have decided to get their energy supply, in another way through aerobic glycolysis and, get a few adenosine triphosphate molecules that way, but not much, But, be able to survive and be switched over to that sort of a condition. And plaque that's all through the body provides a nice protein source for fermentation, and the fats that's in lipo. Protein A that gets laid down as plaque all through the arteries and coagulates and just thickened all through the body. Yeah. And you could see how much was just sitting in the air if you disappeared yourself, sort of thing. And all of that substance doesn't let proper conduction go whatsoever, really. It's really like you've got magnetic cosmic radio wave, and what's able to be resonant, but they're things that get dampened because you've got mucus, you see. And what certainly allows like greater distance sort of beaming, of course, conducted across a JC quanta is superposition and things and critical time. So a spider could make spider silk, for instance, from material. So a shorter wave where radiation is a microwave range all gets converted into direct current, and how does that occur where, you've got a lot of mucus there, and that mucus is sort of dampening everything. So most don't know how transmutation occurs, but, you're going to explain something if you could see it and have inductive and deductive reasoning. But a long time ago, when I was living in the wilderness, one of the things that I did was to collect bird eggs and things and look to see if the egg was fertile or not, and just to look to see things. And it would have a red blood corpuscle if you held it up to the sun, and you could see that, okay. And you're looking through the shell, you could see this red blood corpuscle that had formed, and you'd see that against the sunlight, it would be quite red, really. And so the very first thing that happens there in the egg is a red blood corpuscle. Okay. So in colloid of life, which make up the red blood corpuscle, you're right there inside the egg. And a 12-day-old egg fertilised, of course, has got 600% more mineral and everything in the egg than it had when it was only 3 days old. And it didn't take any nutrition in that time, any of it come from the shell of the egg or anything. No. It was life colloid transmutated anyway. So life colloid can pleomorph down there on a level where fermentation exists, lactic acids get excreted in excess and can't sort of really be broken down properly. That other than allows the immune system to function really well. And so the more that somebody's blood is more hygienic, the better everything is, and the more you have the ability to be able to have cleared away the plaque and things, you see. So otherwise, there's a subject to temperature and pressure and magnetic differential, and hot and cold sides where magnetic voltage is and can explain, 600%. Of course, you've got material that's active, far more massive amount in a 12-day-old egg that's fertilised than it was just at 3 days old in the same, vein. Okay. So, depending on the terrain which is existing, you've got blood-borne inhibitors that block and stop the expression of double spore having gone into ferment, okay. So life colloid really loves, some love to eat salt, for instance. They just love it, and they're called halophil. And then you've got thermophil that's love to live off heat, and you've got all this magnetic differential going on, and energy being collected. So halophil, life colloid, and archaeon-like types of life colloid or bacterium, and eukaryote types of life colloid that have nucleus and things. All of these life colloids just absolutely love to thrive in various sorts of environment like high salt or in very hot vents like 600 degrees or more. So some salt-loving life colloid all sort of have developed strategies to be able to survive in a extremely heavy sort of hypersaline types of condition, accumulating internal sort of material that's compatible to a solute and pumping salt into a cell, and it does this to provide its own battery pack. And so many observations, of course, you could see harnessing a JC quanta energy from the vacuum and producing magnicity and radiation resistance, radiodurans, you might have heard these, withstand thousands of times of radiation that you or I could, and repairing hundreds of DNA and double-strand breaks that would have been there, and reconstructing all of that to have a functional, genome. And then you've got Deinococcus sort of radioduran, which is really long known for astounding radiated resistance and is capable in doses thousands of times, again, more than what any cell could withstand. And so life colloid transmutate one element into another in microscopic isotonic magneton domain is pressurized, and depressurized of magneton on a level of south positive and neutral and north negative magneton, and otherwise also sort of splitting those elements. So Lifecolloid bacterium, Cuprisatus, for instance, Meladurium, it really transmutates element, and people would only think, oh, well, it seems like it got all the gold particles and put it together and created the gold. It doesn't ever think, yeah, no, this was transmutated, one element into another, and gold is produced. So you're looking at your intestinal tract. This is the garden that you're all wrapped around. That's the earth garden. And it's the point being, of course, how much that you've eaten and what's the activity that's typical, where a favourite pastime has been for Lifefood and the things that you've consumed. And if you didn't know it or not, of course, a heavy high-fat carb combo could have triggered, somatostatin. And so that can have not been a really good thing, because eating high protein, high fat carbs, it actually triggers a somatostatin, and then human growth hormone and things like that doesn't get working. So looking at other sort of protein that's produced where the moment is that's needed, you've got to have human growth hormone to be able to do that, and otherwise you've got what's going on as a dead food diet contributing to more a diabetic types of condition that seriously overall starts to lack even more. And these are things that could be definitely is all variable. So turning off secretin where that would have been, where somatostatin would have been released from dead food eating, and then the flow where that goes on, and people could have aged fast where no flow exists, and what's regulating the balance of water in the duodenum environment. So you've got 27 amino acid polypeptide that's secreted in your small intestine by these S cells, and as partially digested food could have entered your stomach, you've got secretin sensing what the primary function is, and to be able to stop and turn acid off and act upon the food state with other enzymes. So you're looking at the pancreas and how things are stimulated in Lifefood, and otherwise you're looking at the terrain of the body, and it's the terrain of the body that causes things to become expressed where it shouldn't be, and that's all substance that has to be cleared away. So sodium and water is maintained. You've got a proper parts of hydrogen level in your duodenum, and it's optimal enzymatic activity. The pancreas ordinarily would have substances to inhibit then gastric acid secretion when that's done, and proper intestinal motility goes on. And if secretin wasn't present, what about that? If you've eaten wrong, then secretin can't be present. What about that? You see? So too many reasons, too long to be listed, of course, is how the blood sugar couldn't have been kept proper where dead food would have been, and the balance of that coordinated proper nutrient when you had a high-fat, high-protein, complex carb combo, which would have raised somatostatin. So if somebody's listening in, of course, you've really got to stop the other processes where things are going, because you definitely do need human growth hormone. And if you're looking at certainly turning off secretin and pancreatic flow where that would have aged your body and things, and where's the attention that's going on to having stopped that gastrointestinal hormone that's regulating balances and things which should be there, and other things which is going on because you've just eaten a high flesh and bean protein with fat and complex carb meal, which today could be not so uncommon really. So you've really got what's behind all of this is not much glucagon to actually raise blood sugar. Okay, so secretin and gastrin and insulin and human growth hormone and cholecystokinin all work where secretin is, and you've got these hormones otherwise to play very important roles where the digestive system is, and no activity otherwise where the stomach would be, or the pancreas would have been, where you've eaten a high protein fat carbo combo, you see. So there's nothing that stimulates the release ever more of digestive enzyme and things where the pancreas and bile and the gallbladder is to help where aided fat and protein carbohydrate digestion is and absorption to take place. But if you've eaten a meal like what we've just talked about there, that's dead food, it's just going to be breaking down into fatty acids and glycerol molecule and going through a secondary pathway to get energy, what have you, and damaging everything in the process of it all. But if you're eating flesh and bean and fat and carbs as a combo, it can't be too many kind words about somatostatin and its effect after that and the condition. So glucagon would have had to be, yes, to keep blood sugar regular, but then that hormone's not going to be released in response. You're going to have had low blood sugar, and then what's going on there to raise that. So nerve cells really require glucose to function. Otherwise, there's a loss of coordination and cognitive memory challenge. Could have been a malfunction where things are, and damaged, of course, due to a lack of not proper glucose overall. And so this is really a metabolic deficiency and causing excitotoxicity. Also, you couldn't say that the cells have a capacity to function and be excited and yet not in this state have a proper magnetic functional sustainableness and only have remained in more depolarized lack of functional state because glucagon wasn't present. So from a high-fat meal, complex carb, heavy protein combo, you've raised somatostatin, it's shut down the stomach and the pancreas, and so your meal's going to be digested in another way, sort of thing like we're talking about, and not through proper channels per se that would pay attention to all the other organs. And so you've got a whole range of things which like the mouth and throat and areas of our body which like have spaces, and so for instance like atrophic vaginitis is a very good example where the fluids are all fermenting more, and so non-stop ever is there some sort of discharge of mucus going on, you see. So low hormones where circulation would have been low and lacking a proper good fitness, and where the ovulation cycle is, and somebody would have been in the last phase of that, or the period itself, which cannot so much be synced up to ovulation. But where low estrogen and progesterone can be, what's the expression of tissue where all things are, where reduced estrogen levels could be, and that could have caused abrasion and caustics relative to endothelial tissue where the walls are of the vagina, for instance. And so where, if you could think about that, where the mouth is even, tissue could have become thin, and you could see dryness of where lips are and stuff, which could lead to irritation and inflammation and things of the throat. And of course you could imagine how fermentedness conditions can be occurred where any spaces where the body is. So it's a variable that isn't even something looked into like should be. And so your parts of hydrogen, which is really high in the blood, is really crazy. It's over the top. and parts of hydrogen, for instance, where the vagina is supposed to be like really low, 3.9, that's acid, okay. And when it's not that state, gosh, your endothelial cells aren't properly functioning. And so non-ecological condition evermore is, and that's the fact of things, you see. So it's opportunity to have cleared away things and cleared away the fermentive condition which has been going on in the body. And so what's been lacked is parts of hydrogen, that's pH, and your own conductivity and negative redox, which is your ability to pass a current on through things, that's conductivity, and negative redox is your ability to have antioxidants. Otherwise, the terrain could have caused a pleomorphic condition of a double spore just to have turned into a non-ecological sort of overgrowth of other things like candida and fungus, where they could just have grown off the protein and the fat, which you definitely need protein excess also for that to only have thrived. It won't thrive without protein excess. So it needs extra sources of nitrogen not found where sugar is or anything. And it's not, it's so natural that in the blood, if anyone like this is like eating excessive protein, the blood is really just a bit like a trash heap. So no ecological train allows the body fluid where excessive nitrogen and oxy sort of lack carbon, also oxygen exchange would have been, so not much proper cell respiration. And then you've got a lot of sediment that's gone into the body, and then stone in the pancreas and plaque tied peripheral to all the blood flow, and it's like a steak head that's fermentive and thriving, and so not non-thriving, you see, as a condition. So it really can cause all sorts of skin itching and scratching where eczema is, and internal sorts of conditions like that where boils could be the same thing, and itching and burning and thick white sorts of discharges and things, and seriously lacking proper comfort. And so it's really causing ourselves to have the things, that we should have, but a lot of things that people are doing, isn't it? They're looking in the wrong direction, maybe. So, if we could think about it just for a second here, you've got Lifecolloid where extraneous protein is present. It ends up as disease, in a disease state, an excessive protein past 5%, so it's really triggering a yeast response in the blood, and clumping and trashing the blood with yeast and fungus and mold, and bloodborne inhibitors not being present where that is after that, and a lacked lifecolloidal drain. And so where nitrogen sources are deficient and food diet wouldn't have been followed, yeast becomes stressed, leading to a slow or stuck fermented sort of prophylactic type of shock where the process could overwhelm somebody, and yeast and mold and fungus smoothly not taken care of by having proper pacifiant in the body. So body odour really could tell a lot. For instance, it really is like a smell of sulphur where the breath is, and fermented product is then certainly been in the stomach, and the blood being stressed, and yeast state definitely is there, producing an undesirable compounds like hydrogen sulfide, which is smelt like the smell of rotten eggs, for instance. So dead food guarantees yeast in your blood and pathogens and an elegant sufficiency of nice amounts of nitrogen to grow neoplastic cells with, and yeast assembles from that nitrogen. And so you have to have that, not sugar. You've got to have protein. You've got to have a nice amount of it and plenty of fat. And you've got to have that all tucked throughout the whole body as plaque. And then somebody's going to be a bit of a sick puppy where that is. So the difference between organic and inorganic nitrogen is where the source of nitrogen is accessing sort of a cell aerobic glycolysis and fermenting, And so you've got the cytoplasm, which is the fluid inside the cell, sort of, and it's fermenting, and it's causing an excrement to be excreted by, it's just called mycotoxin from the Lifecolloid, that start to pleomorph and change their form inside the cell. And so Lifefood avoids all of that, but otherwise you've got really high methionine and high glutathione, and protein like that, really, from bean and flesh, always damages and causes plaque and causes mucus and a stickiness more to the blood and everything. So dead food consumption is enzymatic resistant, and heavy flesh and bean diet all has a lot of methionine and glutathione, and it should be avoided. And elevating otherwise your levels of homocysteine, which is really sharp and sharded in its manner that what it has an effect of your arteries and capillaries. So lipoprotein A would have been laid down as a lot of plaque after eating those foods. So liver and kidney damage, none could say that it isn't exacerbating anybody's condition where you're eating totally not the right food. How are you going to have human growth hormone for, producing better protein and stuff? Excessive methionine should really be avoided. Homocysteine levels otherwise is a very potential risk of cardiovascular disease and liver damage and everything. And so, where you're getting essential amino acid that's normal for your health, because otherwise, like some foodstuffs that you're eating, like that dead food, is certain to lead to toxic effect. So while methionine is essential for amino acid and necessary for normal health and everything, you've got to avoid excessive amounts of that, because otherwise you've got really heart issues and you've got homocysteine in your blood, which go ahead and have a little bit of a look at that. That's going to have cause really, really bad health issues. So dead food consumption and high flesh bean increases the risk of dementia and Alzheimer-like sort of symptoms and everything, and lots of studies really show that. And so excessive methionine really gets fermented and it feeds neoplastic cells, and they just love nitrogen. So it's converted into lactic acid. It's really seriously impacting neoplastic cells to have grown really faster. So neoplasm is rapid in producing ever more high levels of toxic oxidative byproduct. And along with that, you've got toxic glutathione excess fermenting and broken down through aerobic glycolysis inside the cell cytoplasm. And so you've got live food, of course, that counteracts all of that stress, says you can survive. So protein-rich diet, flesh, bean, heavy amounts of protein that comes from greens and things in excess, and fat and complex carbs along with that, causes a great resistance of carbohydrate and things to be broken down proper, and producing a high level of glutathione that's acted upon like pleomorphic organisms do. And dead food diet is for sure what should be really avoided. Neoplastic cells otherwise just love you to tuck into that flesh and bean and have elevated glutathione and neoplastic condition afterward, you see. So dead food consumption, nobody could say that all that enzyme-resistant material doesn't reduce cell respiration, which it does, and doesn't clog everything up, which it does, and doesn't add to mucus, which it sure does. So plaque, and all of that. And do you have to have sugar to kick anything off? No. It's not going to kick anything off. Do you have to have a little bit of nitrogen to kick it off? Yes, you do. And when it turns off, it's because why? Because now it just doesn't have any more nitrogen. It's just robbed everything from everything. So neoplastic cells just love nitrogen. Just run over the street and grab it, and see if it's walking past. So cells have antioxidant capacity that enables neoplastic cells to have been able to survive instead of get cleared away. So dead food, flesh and bean eating causes glutathione peroxidase levels to be substance that goes on ever more for tumours to be grown more, and so lacking detox, of course, what's going on when you're not detoxing, right? So heavy flesh diets full of phosphate and molecules of death, like in glyconeurominic acid is the one surfactant, for instance, that's in cow's flesh, for instance. So, and we've just said, yeah, all that's going to raise somatostatin. Okay, that's going to block and stop glucagon. Yeah, right. And glucagon isn't going to be there to raise blood sugar. No, it's not functioning. Somatostatin is going on instead, and that's inhibited the pancreas and parts of the digestive system, and that's really a bit of a story that we're talking about. So dead food consumption, only just eating 3 or 4 times a day, oh my God. And it's just always shutting the pancreas and the upper stomach down, and where you're going to get glucagon after that, you see. So it sort of creates metabolic disorders. Hypoglycemia stimulates pancreatic alpha cells otherwise to release glucagon, yes, and that's normal, yes. But can that after a dead food combo meal? No. So, and when hypoglycemia would be there, it inhibits glucagon secretion, you see. So the stomach shuts down, and the condition is known more as gastroparesis and delayed gastric emptying. And it's heavy, complex meals which sit undigested where the stomach is and extended for a period of time, causing bloat. And does anybody want to exercise after that? No. So dead food eventually stops all the stomach from being able to empty itself proper, and decrepitness, impeding and thriving goes on. And nobody could ever say that's not the case, you see. Cognitive decline, low blood sugar, somatostatin release from dead food diet over time, and then your nerve is not going to be really applied properly where nutrient is. And so have you ever heard how glucose deprivation really is hard on your nerve cell, and how the nerve can have died of excitotoxicity? Can you be looking at the massive release of excitotoxic amino acid? Also, what's wiping out all the nerve cell that's exciting them to death is amino acid glutamate and aspartate and excitotoxic compounds that flood the synapse where a dead food diet like we're talking about would have been eaten. And it does the same for any other animal. And you've got an excessive influx of calcium into the neuron. It's like a stone heart, a stone brain. So everybody could see that you can't really cook food and give that to the animals, because in the zoo they all died a terrible death, and they died just the same as all domestic animals do. They haven't got their proper food. But when they were given the enzymatic active food originally sort of for them and not baked and fried and boiled anymore, they said, really? I said, no. Well, that's not hygienic. Got to bake and fry and boil it. You know what I mean? And they said, no. These animals have got to have that without all of that, And they all lived after that, you see. So it's the nutrient which could make it to the nucleus membrane, and otherwise, no, it can't. Why? Because it's devoid. It doesn't have any zeta potential. It's not going to go anywhere. The diet was dead food, mainly. And it's just triggered somatostatin, which turns off the growth hormone production of the antipituitary and everything. And the nerve then goes on to lack glucose, and it's just left in a state of depolarization, abnormal, harmful circumstance, left with dead food diet, like rock salt and indigestible protein. So heavy phosphate, excitingly toxic, and glutamate excess where dead food is, it really is impacting the severity and deprivation and outright heraldedness of neurotransmitter disease, typically. So it's really a metabolic disorder, not a neurotransmitter disorder. So it's really about your sodium, potassium, pumping the production of adenosine triphosphate, which is your energy molecules that's inside the cell. It's got to be negatively charged compared to the outside. And without enough glucose, how's that going to happen, you see? Somatostatin would have blocked that normal activity where the pancreas would have been able to function. But if glucose was scarce, ATP production sure is too. That's energy. And then what's got, you can see it's just plummeting. It's caused the pump to stop where things are efficient. And so you've got a hippocampus, and you've got, areas of the brain where short-term memory really is supposed to be. And what happens where compounds come in and it's just got heavy metals with all of that, and it's just a drug, and it's going to go into those spaces and interfere with the nerve function is, and short-term memory impact and not get cleared away. And so you've just got nerve toxin forming where that heavy metal would have been, and solvent and heavy metal where you've got lacked glucagon. Nobody's talked about it. Why? Because that's not the approach they've taken. So if it would be, you've got digestive enzyme, and it's very important because, like, where calorie restriction is, you're going to live a longer life, and you're going to have either more human growth hormone secretion and things just like that. But somatostatin is really known as a human growth hormone inhibitor. So when you don't have enough of that, of course, human growth hormone, you're not going to really thrive or heal up. So too many challenges are going on where dead food consumption is, and it's never not an activation of somatostatin. And receptor seen then going on, inhibiting calcium and magneton and activating potassium channel, affecting magnicity where the cell is. So what need really is there to heal up where dead food would be? Of course, the more acidic that would be, the more stone, and the more that you would not going to be having your non-stick zone like you're supposed to have on your cell membrane. So healing, can that happen where your blood is weighed more alkaline than it should be? Of course, gut cell rejuvenation really is very much about giving you the proper fruit acid and South positive to come back into your blood and things. Otherwise, the blood is too alkaline. And the proper terrain to cope with enzymatic activity where dead food is detrimental to where healing is because it doesn't have the proper pH. And healing up ulcers and all of that sort of thing where Lifecolloid terrain is normal, otherwise the pleomorphic stages of aggregating fission differentiation is going on where the Lifecolloid is, and that could be not going in a proper direction towards things where wound healing is and things. So putting that aside and just imagining that somebody's not nose breathing, wow, that's good through your sleep, but doing something else instead. And having lost all of the acid base, causing the blood to be more alkaline and then decrepitness instead. And so most people's blood is around about 7.4 when it should be 7.3. And their tissue inside their organ, like the cells, should be about 6.8, but it's about 5.8. And so there where there's a greater disparity, you've got more of a stick zone going on where the membrane is, you see. So the blood pH is around 7.3 in the past, and the tissue internal will be about 6.8. And it's a basic non-stick zone between those two, but where suddenly a disparity is going on and it's existing, you have to be further apart. Suddenly now you're going to have more of a stick zone where this is. So the internal condition of the acid of the cell could become around about 5.8, and their blood could be around about 7.42. And you're really talking about sticky mucus, sort of really, sticking the blood together, letting them not have a proper discrete larger surface exchange. And so the surface Lifecolloid organelle interior of your cells, the membrane, and the permeability surfactant enhancement is really not going on like it should. So the concept of non-stick zone, which really is describing this adhesive surface characteristic of cells where the region of your membrane surface is crucial, matter of fact, for a process like cell migration, immune response, activation of your cells require life hydrate like vitamin L to be able to do this, you see. And what happens where that is being interfered with. So what's proper is your organs really have heat and cold shock protein drawn into the cell membrane to help cause a functionness, and you've got immune leukocyte and non-adherent, non-stick sort of moving freely through the bloodstream and reaching places to get to new toxin, what have you. And saliva is a great factor where predicting the parts of hydrogen is, and urine, and you add those up. But you're going to multiply your saliva by 2 and then divide, add to that to your urine, and then divide by 3. And that's going to give you sort of a relative maybe part of hydrogen and things, but it's going to depend upon what you ate and those sorts of things just beforehand, and being consistent to be able to learn where that is. But you could be guaranteed, like what I've said, basic is going on. So cystic fibrosis has had its effect, and where it's missing its aromatic amino acids, it can't really transport bicarbonate, nor negative magneton, nor transport chloride. And so the Lifecolloid epithelial cells where your meninges are, your throat, stomach, pancreas, lung, heart, intestinal mucosa, all could have apical sort of surface of the cells that's supposed to be in a non-adhesive zone, but it isn't. It's thick and sticky mucus instead. So non-adhesive zones really must prevent the organ wall from being able to have stuck to itself, and otherwise you've got occludedness going on, and how you're going to go and have sort of some cleansing condition. And so just to give you a bit of an idea, if you looked under the microscope, it's very scientific, and it's totally not too scientific. If you never look, that's going to be really bad. So if you haven't observed your blood, you should, and you could be learning a lot more about how things grow through aggregation, fusion, and differentiation. And, otherwise what's growing there is suspended where a liquid medium is, and instead of sticking to cells or red blood corpuscles sticking to each other, you've got blood-borne inhibitor that's keeping things apart and blocking and stopping the double spore from, being able to have pleomorphed into what's non-ecological. So the blood you're looking at is really clean. But basically, it shows that you really don't have a stick zone, and you're not having any loss of zeta potential, which you sure do if you're eating a lot of dead food. And otherwise, you've got specialized transmembrane protein, which facilitates cell-to-cell extracellular matrix attachment, which is inside the body, or can be impacting the resonant function of your cells. Cooked eggs and pea protein, relentless brought in, where that food would be, when your saliva would certainly have grown camel's legs in the morning in the water and wouldn't have been able to disperse very well. So glandular secretions like saliva are really a major, and so where you're looking at that disperse itself into a glass of water, it should. Otherwise, DNA and RNA from your own body really is doping nutrient like it's supposed to from the parotid gland, submandibular, and the sublingual minor gland, where all of these contain RNA, and gland and cell from the circulatory system also do. So this tiny little class rate of this material is really important because it's compatible to be able to sense that nutrient is really more you. And so eating really is drawing blood supply to the gums, and you've got gingival crevice fluid, and all of this has got RNA in it. Endothelial cells also slough off where DNA is put over complex where the saliva is. And so gases and all of this are describing what, when it's clean, you've just got baby fresh breath. Otherwise, you've got a brush border down into capillaries, which is really blocked by indigestible extracellular matrix of foreign protein like mineral colloid and non-physiological salt mixed with microplastic. All of that's really seen, very common today. And how can your blood circulate past that? It really doesn't. And so those gliaxial threads that are made a bit more of sulfur, they break down, and so it causes a smell of sulfur more on the breath, and that's evident that microcirculation is improper. So Brunnering is really don't break your fast and only eat once a day, you see. And otherwise, Brunnering is resting the intestine, and you rest it through the day, and cleansing of the cell walls goes on. Otherwise, you could imagine like the natural almond aged Gouda that we make just for this whole circumstance to help heal things up. To give you an idea. And it's how your body's able to sustain itself for years and not to have lost any value. You've got substances like the Gouda, which you could just leave that out and it's not going to necessarily lose any of its value. It's extraordinary and it won't rot or break down at all. So L-Celliferus melplanetarium is full on in there. The Lifecolloid of that culture is billions of colony-forming factor, all grown and aged, soaked in blanched almond is soaked in orange and apple, garlic and peppers, aged over time, and in various wood like mesquite. and hickory to give it more notes of that. So really, it's extraordinary, of course. A pinch of all this is needed just to culture 1,000 gallons of milk. In over the course of a day, eventually you're going to get 100 pounds of cheese out of that, you see, like blue cheese. So slight hickory, mesquite, pepper notes of orange and garlic. It's sort of like tangy. It's an aged Gouda, which takes kind of time to be able to create this, but very aromatic amino acid where the cheese is. And the Gouda for flavour is really more where the whey is put back into the cheese, you've got more flavour. And so aromatic amino acids are bountiful building blocks where the protein like Jubb's Gouda is. You've got beautiful needed transport of micronutrient, critical, of course, for your nerve and endothelial cells aligning the passageways of yourself. And you've got everything to have crossed over the blood-brain barrier and be able to get up into the brain, and plenty of neurotransmitter substance you've got there in the Gouda, you see. So how about getting free-formed amino acid? You don't need much, and now you've got everything. Otherwise, everything's got to be digested down. But how about putting some of this sort of into a sauce or making starter culture and that sort of thing and growing it more, you see. But a small pinch of this really rids bad breath in a minute if a test is done. And so otherwise, plaque really is a build-up and it's a deposit all in the, and you've got wrong sort of amount of pigments and all that sort of thing in the skin, all jaundiced. And the Gouda really guards against all of this. You see, it helps start to clear things up of a substance just of itself. And producing selenium glutathione peroxidase, it does excrete that. And we really need that for proper nerve cleansing and for getting thyroid to function properly and have proper metabolism. So it's something which, if you have a little pinch of it, you've suddenly got to have more of it. It's really like tasty. It wants you to, pick it up again and eat a bit more of it. But putting a small spread a little bit over something that's sourdough'd and having some butter of itself and things, it's got enzyme to help break everything down. So it's really the Gouda which is left and doesn't spoil. It's got natural good bloodborne inhibitors in Lifecolloid, unique in the age culturing of this, and it takes 10 months or more for it to start to make it a batch that's tasty and prominent. Of course, it's really discovered that you've got this orbital organ in the back of your upper throat, and it's the back that's behind the top of the nose air tract, where throat, and in the opening for airflow, you see. And the orbital organ, or this tubarial organ, known more today now in science, is performing a role of saliva and immune complex protection. And the Gouda has L-Salivarius malplantarium that's found there, and it's implantable, you see, and eco-sterilizing these tissues, which is really needed. So the tissue could be engaged where it's proper scavenging and clearing away things are. So this tubarial organ is really recently just noticed more and enlivened that you've got proper throat culture. And so saving your immune system working proper and checking your condition, you've got this tubarial gland that's located deep in the upper throat behind the nose, and in that region you've got the nasopharynx pharynx sort of positioned, a piece of cartilage called the torus tuberous, which the organ gets its name from. So the tubarius and orbital organ is really a vital, proper immune enzymatic fluid response that's needed. It's giving you the mucus that's activated and the sense of what's needed. And the tubarial organ is another salivary organ, sensing the body's response to food and preparing the response ahead of time, especially if allergen would have been brought in. So long before actual consuming the toxin, the body's starting to have a conditioned immune reactive initiated preparation. And so for recovery, the immune challenge could be and in advance. And so body fat and advancedness of that to start getting all laid down as lipoprotein A and adipose tissue all of that gets laden down as protective sort of mucus also, and it gets all of that kicked off. So allergies really is just a lack of protease enzymes that breaks down all of that protein. Otherwise, you know, everything is fine. And the smallest amount of enzymatic material, like we're talking about, like amylase, protease, and lipase, you've got the enzymes to help break everything down, you see. So long before you take a bite, the body's prepared itself. You've got responses of thought causing a brain-body-gut connection. The tubercular organ is organising its response, and you could see various things like insulin spike anticipatorily. Your allostatic sensation is beforehand, and this anticipation of what the nutrient is the great source. And so otherwise you've got substances starting to be released by the gallbladder, signaling your brain, and these sorts of things, you see. So the role of somatostatin is quite extraordinary, mate, and how that could have been an inhibitor of the digestive system if you're not focused to learn what Lifefood is. So how about learning a little bit more about this for sure? Podcast that we've been doing really has been talking a bit about this. So anyway, look, you've got somatostatin that if it was released, it's because of that high-fat protein-carbo combo. And you've got reduced gastric acid as a result. You've got pepsin secretion. You've got slowed gastrointestinal motility. And you've got an inhibitingness of the release of digestive hormone, such as gastrin, secretin, and stomach content. And so those things all can have been inhibited quite considerably, Lukey. Anyway, hope we've had a good show today, mate, yeah? Yeah, love you, mate.